Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. And I have Gavin here today. If you would like to introduce yourself.
I am Gavin, and I know Katie through my wife, Sage. They met at Stanford, and I'm super excited to get to talk today with a person who I really admire.
Woo! So you are, I very
Yeah.
much admire you. You are our first educator who I am interviewing. So we're setting the bar really high. And I thought you could describe how you got into being an educator and then later, like your philosophy of education.
Yeah, absolutely. I think getting into education was easy to wrap my head around. My parents are teachers. My grandparents, like my grandma and my grandpa are teachers, and my uncle's a teacher. So that part is easy to get understand as to why it would be worthwhile. Like my dad would always come home with like a lot of really nice things to say. He was never complained, and my mom is like an educational genius. So I that part was easy. I They always told me just to do what I enjoyed, which was language learning. And so I did Spanish, and there's a limited amount of things that can directly like translate to Spanish, being teaching, and that was natural for me. And you find meaning later, I think. I had a really strong mentor teacher uh, who I co-taught with in Salinas to majority Spanish-speaking community. The students spoke better Spanish than I did, so I immediately had to like reformat like what my role in the classroom was. It wasn't teaching them Spanish; it was getting them to explore new ideas in Spanish, and uh, it was an AP Spanish, so we weren't really measuring like grammar. So that kind of like changed my mind about like what language learning is. I think discussing topics that are interesting to us is going to make like learning easier. And I think Spanish is or any language class, you have that advantage. Obviously, you have to talk about stuff that's boring, but you also can talk about stuff that's interesting. So I guess my teaching philosophy is to get to know my students, to know what that is that they find interesting. Meaning I'm being flexible, and I'm allowing myself to be at the front giving lessons. Like that takes a backseat more to student work, both collaborative and individual, sort of trying to challenge the hierarchy that a classroom sort of creates, like desks forward at a teacher. You do as I say. I create the rubric, the scoring, the grades, and then I choose what your grade is. I think if the only thing that students care about is what their grade is at the end, then they're not prioritizing what they're learning. Rather, like just it's sort of like incentivizes them to cheat. All this to say, like this comes later, right? I think I'm constantly developing as a teacher, and there's things that I can do better, and ways in which strict teachers about grading and discipline, like they have strengths that I don't. But basically, my philosophy is constantly change with the students and make sure that their input is guiding the class rather than my knowledge, because they have knowledge that I don't.
Yeah, that's and one of the main reasons that I wanted to interview you was exactly what you talked about, that you have this sort of viewpoint that like instead of a top-down like understanding of how teaching works, which I think has been kind of the way things have been in America for the last 100 years or so, like you have a much more like one-to-one sort of picture of what like an ideal classroom setup is like, which is something that I through the last 3 years of grad school have really discovered about myself is like I I mean, I hate rules and I don't learn well through punishment and getting bad grades like doesn't make me want to like do better. It makes me sort of like frustrated. And I think a lot of students feel that way, where like getting bad grades is sort of like self-reinforcing or counterintuitive or like classroom punishment is like, you know, I this also is weirdly sounding more like dog training, which I watch a lot of like dog training videos on YouTube. But like to get back to normal, I think what I'm like pretty interested in is the concept of like a classroom or an educational space that's much more like collaborative, synergistic, and like people talking. And I'm wondering sort of how you've seen implementing strategies like that work and how that's like affected students and um, their actual learning outcomes.
Yeah. So one thing that like I'm connecting it to your question, but I want to ask you a question to kind of lead into my answer. Uh, when you found that you're like resistant to punishment or you felt bad when a teacher was, it's like you're right, it's like training essentially. We learn strategies that feel kind of like I mean, students respond to it and they like it, but it does feel a bit like dog training with like verbal cues or like clapping or like we do this or whatever. Um, were you able to sort of self-identify issues that you had in a class while you were there?
Yeah, I think so. My educational background is like I was like pushed very hard both internally and by my parents when I was younger to be academically successful, which is like you mentioned, I went to Stanford. My brother went to Stanford. Like we're very nerdy. Um, and part of that was like I never had bad grades growing up. School was very easy to me. It's something I loved. It's why I went to grad school. I still want to do a PhD at some point. I love being in a classroom setting because I like learning and talking and I'm very philosophical. So I never got bad grades until I was a physics student at Stanford, and I am not good at physics. And I proceeded to get lots of bad grades because I was just really bad at the math, and I was also like in a bad kind of like emotional state for a variety of reasons. And so my solution to that was dropping out of physics to become a philosopher. So that was bad. I should have dealt with that differently, but it ended up being fine. And then this last year was the first time I got like bad grades at art school because CalArts doesn't give grades. They give like high pass,
Yeah.
pass, low pass, fail.
Okay.
And I thought that grading system was really liberating because I didn't care. Also, like whatever grades I got in art school don't matter. Like they'll never affect me. But my second to last semester, I got a low pass for the first time like ever, which I thought was insane because it was like one of my last classes. Clearly, I should be getting better grades, not worse grades. And it was mostly due to like philosophical differences I had with my professors, and the work that I was making wasn't like good or interesting to them. And so my gut reaction was actually sort of instead of taking their advice and doing what they wanted, I just started looking at the things that I was particularly interested in myself and then getting better at those things. And so I ended up doing better, but not in the direction that they wanted, but it ended up being fine in the end. I don't know if that answered your question though.
It absolutely does. I mean, you like are exactly the type of student that I think my teaching style works well on, and I think that's something that I see a lot more with newer generations. Like they're different, but and they're from our perspective as people of similar age, there might be things that we think are weirder about younger people, but there's things that I really respect and admire, and one of those is the ability to like uh self-reflect and diagnose themselves as to like what's going on in their head
Yeah.
and like a really cool accurate way that I don't think I could do until I was like 25 or something maybe even later so if you were in my class I would ask you I could see probably just by like a report how what's going on and I would probably ask to talk to you away from people uh never like just letting people know that they're not in trouble. It's just a conversation. And then I just ask people what's going on, knowing that, and telling them they're not in trouble, just saying, hey, what's going on? For example, I had a kid that kept interrupting uh because he was found a lesson too hard. And when the lesson was over, I said, "Hey, Zavi, come here." And he just goes, "Sorry, sorry, I get it now." And I was like, "Oh no, no, you're not in trouble. What's going on? Why are you interrupting?" And he goes, "I think it's because I'm usually really good at school, and I was having trouble with that lesson." I go,
Mm,
"Oh." Cool. So like I understand feeling frustrated. Let's see the lesson out to its fruition. If you have questions along the way, ask the questions, but otherwise we can leave the comments aside, and then that way we're not like detracting attention away from the learning itself. And he says, okay, that sounds good. Um, with those like conversations, I'm learning about students' needs and understanding of the material, uh, and I can measure what they understood then versus what they understood later, so I can measure their progress against themselves rather than against myself,
Right.
because I'm also a visitor in the language, and I think anyone in language brings their own strengths and weaknesses. Um, so just showing growth, as well as like implementing teachability, if they're able to show they are that they are listening better, or they are implementing the way I teach better, then I feel like I'm proving that the students that they are becoming and will become are progressing in the right direction. I have the benefit of Spanish not being like a super measurable thing. I think like if you're learning it in high school, there's only so much you can achieve. My main focus as a teacher is to get them to learn something, achieve something like the standards ideally, but also like it, because if they're not enjoying it, then they're not going to pursue it outside of high school, which is the
Yeah.
ultimate goal.
Yeah. And I think, oh, you hit on a lot of things I want to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is that, like, I think the example you just gave about the student who was interrupting because they didn't understand the particular lesson really highlights that, like, teaching in a classroom is so different from having one-on-one tutoring,
Yeah.
because you are corralling like whatever 15 to 500 people in one direction, and everyone's going to be at different places, and you are acting as like an entertainer, educator, like juggler, balancing all of these things. And like that in and of itself seems incredibly difficult. Instead of just having the space to like individually meet every student's needs. And I thought
Yeah.
you could talk about that. And then also I want to talk about the like fun aspect, or like having people enjoy the thing that you're teaching.
Yeah. Individually meeting the needs of every student is something that in public education is near impossible. The best thing I can do is try and then hope that they're not hating every second of being somewhere, which sometimes they are, just because being in a confined space for a set period of time is really difficult for them. So that best thing I can do for that is to make sure that uh that need is accommodated, whether that's like leaving or for however long. But coming back, like I mean, if you're not enjoying it and you're actively uncomfortable, you're not learning, and you may need that 20 minutes outside. I think before like when we were in school, I mean, I never left class
Yeah.
ever, even to go to the bathroom, and I was never late, and I didn't vouch for myself in the way that these students do. I think there's like a middle ground, obviously, but they I guess meeting the individual needs of all students would be to sort of create the calm environment, and accept the fact that not everything I do is going to be challenging to everyone. Um, so who ends up not suffering, but maybe ends up being intrigued the least are the really high achieving students who already got it the first time,
Yeah.
and are ready to move on. Uh, Um, that's completely lost, and we've already moved on without them. I'd rather make sure that they're understanding. The way I meet the students who are high achievings, like the way I try to, their high achieving status should be utilized as a sort of like a leadership role, but
Mhm.
you never want to, you always want to keep in mind that you never want to reward like high achieving, hardworking students with more work.
Right.
That should never be the thing you do. So you do it through the guise of group work, where you have people work together. Um, you usually do that with students that are, it used to be differentiated, right? High achieving student, some students who are like about what you expect, and students that are lower achieving. But it actually turns out that if you put more students who are about the same level of achieving, they end up having better conversations, and
Yeah.
they end up getting to like deepen their understanding in a
You just cut out a bit. Oh no.
uh,
Gavin. Um, you were saying that when you have students that are at the same level who are interacting with each other, they get more out of it
yeah.
because they're, I don't know, more sympathetic or synergistic.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like students who don't understand something may not understand the same thing. Chances are, like their line of thinking may be similar. Uh, and so it may be bad when they're like, "Oh, I don't understand it either." That's my role as an educator to kind of circulate and help them in a more of a tutoring role. Higher achieving students understand it, but while they are high achieving, they can still deepen their understanding by teaching each other new things that they might understand. If they both understand at the same level, there's always more you can delve into. That's where I come by in my role as well. I mean, there's a lot to be said about comfort level in education. I think it's good to be uncomfortable, but uh, you don't have to be in order to learn. I think you can, if you're approaching something with an open mind and the ability to make mistakes, then not every single discipline has to be challenging. So that was like kind of how I try to meet the needs of all students, is uh sort of have my like differentiation in place in the lesson so that students with different learning needs, it's already addressed, and just being flexible. What was the second part of your question?
The second part might play into your favorite discussion of play. And yesterday I had an interview with Luke, my boyfriend, about how he keeps making art and like doesn't feel like burnout, just like constantly makes art. And he
Mhm.
said that he approaches it kind of like working out, where like if you do like the best or most difficult workout to make yourself the strongest, like you're gonna get burnt out really easily because you'll do that a few times and then you'll hate it and never do it again. Versus like if you just do a little bit of something that you think is fun and enjoyable, you'll actually do that every day. That's how he approaches art making. So I was wondering if you had a sort of similar approach to like how to make things fun in the classroom so that like I don't know, when I was in high school I definitely had those classes where I was like looking forward to it every day and I was like this is my happy place. This is not one of the things I hate. And I feel like it sounds like your class is that way, at least hopefully to a lot of your students. Um, cool, Gavin.
Yeah, I'm always trying to learn new methods in how I can make like class time together fun. I think like I'm not a traditional teacher in the sense that of the way of like how I talk. Like I don't have a teacher voice. How I'm talking to you right now is essentially how I talk to kids. It's just like the main thing I monitor is the subject matter, but like I'm approachable, and I'm not afraid to like engage and make jokes. Uh, just as long, because that's a certain way to build trust, and that's a way like I can redirect like their attention from me to like the whole class. and it's like an opportunity to maybe continue the fun that we were having interpersonally to like the full classroom. In terms of like activities, students have the most fun when they're talking to each other. Like as fun as it is to talk to a teacher who isn't speaking to you as an authority figure, even if I am, right? But more of like just a person who enjoys talking to you. Students really enjoy just talking to themselves. Uh, so I allow animated discussions. It can be on topic for the most part, and but it can veer off topic as long as it redirects back to the subject material at times. So I think what students really like is the expectation, the respect that I give them, which is like you have like an objective, here's your objective. You can absolutely crowdsource this. You can work in the groups that you choose. You can be independent if you like. But we will, spend time full class discussing it together. Uh, I'm biased because I mean I think in all of our any teacher's pedagogy, whether they want to admit it or not, it's based off of like what makes sense to them. I have a teacher who I worked with the last 4 years, and she's like an incredible teacher, but it's like an incredible teacher the way that like the educational theory books are written.
Yeah.
And for her, she's like it make like the thing this way. And that's something I'm like, what I can never do it. It doesn't make sense to me. I need to be able to change on the spot and be flexible. And I think I'm open about that. And I tell the students, well, isn't working. Here's something else we can do. And so in terms of like activities, there's like games we do. We go outside. We do stuff that's like chill. Mostly it's just like the environment. So like the
Yeah.
vibe. I don't want to like be like I'm cool and funny, but like to them I am. And that's usually the feedback that that's usually the feedback that I get. And like they don't really know. They're like, you're such a great teacher. And I'm like, I don't ask why, but
Yeah.
my like leading theory is like they just like the feeling that they have when I'm there. And it's because they don't feel like they're being judged, even though a teacher's job partially is to judge.
Yeah. Because you're not, um, it almost feels like they're not being educated. Like
Yeah.
it's not like they're receiving information from someone who has it and they are just absorbing it. It's like a more interactive environment, which I think is like a huge part of feeling comfortable, building trust. Like so much of education is actually just being a human and interacting with another human. And I think we forget that when we have these very like sterile hierarchical systems of education, which are often out of the control of individual educators, which is
Yeah.
sad. I wanted to ask how, because you've been teaching for a while now, how the sort of like arc of COVID has affected your teaching, and also about like how teaching, I guess your students are Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
Are they Gen Z?
They're Gen Z.
Or what's after Gen Z? Have we figured that out yet, or are we still in Gen Z?
Gen Alpha, I think they're like 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll get them soon.
Eventually they'll be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yikes.
I guess it's Gen Alpha. It's just the alphabet, right? So, and it's every like 16, 17. I don't know. I think you're the last millennial, right?
I am the
Yeah.
last one. Me specifically, 1996
An
is the last
A24
millennial.
movie, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is funny because my brother's 5.5 years older and he's like very millennial, not in like a boring way, but in a like solidly cultural way. And then
Yeah.
I see some stuff that Gen Zs do, and I'm like, oh God, that's terrifying. Like too internet, too much.
Yeah.
But in other ways, I feel more related to them than to like a 40-year-old who's like possibly buying a house. Although in America, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're in this really weird era, and I thought you as someone who's like only slightly older than I am, who's teaching these students who are younger, like whether that's like weird or like you said, it's like very much changing the way traditional norms of American education have been for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that like I mean, at my last school site, there was a lot of teachers that were close to my age, and they have similar philosophies. Not saying that like I mean, they're probably a bit more hierarchical, but they also are really aware of the fact that like the damage that hierarchy has on students. In terms of COVID, it led me to lean harder into my philosophy. I think I became a much more lenient teacher through it because I had to be. I think it reinforced that idea in my head. And it also the teachers who like their feedback being like, you should do this, you should do that because this leads to this, like technically being right because it's proven educational theory. Um, like backed off because they were seeing the use in prioritizing physical and mental health. So like Zoom school forced teachers to view the roles differently. When students came back, it was very difficult for them, emotionally. I think, uh, like people our age probably took it a bit easier than them, just because financial like independence to some degree, or just in terms of maturing,
Yeah.
uh, naturally. Students like probably don't understand exactly how it affected them, although some did. Uh, Very timid, not very trusting of one another, and the environments I could create last year were came a lot harder the year before.
Okay.
So my experience was to sort of meet the students where they were. I had some classes that like really took to it, and I had other classes where they were great at understanding the material, but they were not so great at interacting with each other. And it would be a really weird experience, like you said some at one point, like running around, like entertaining, which is literally what I would do. I would run to one side of the room, run to the other, and I wouldn't like be like, woohoo, look at me, but it felt like I was you know, uh performing to a crowd that was not impressed at all. And I try to format that to them. I'm like not an accusatory way, just like uh somebody respond to me like can you imagine if you said like hello to someone and they just stared back at you?
Yeah.
Or like
100%.
and I don't view my teaching as a performance in theater, but it uses some techniques for crowd response. I can't imagine like somebody creating art, uh and like art is supposed to be like inclusive and I think draw like provoke discussion in a certain way, either with yourself or with others. And just to like maybe like present an art piece, either like visual or theatrical or musical or whatever, and then say, what do you think? And the person just kind of stares at you and then maybe looks down. That would be way worse than someone being like, to me anyway, I didn't like what you did because blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Like I would much rather a student be like, this isn't making sense to me, and I don't like your class because blah blah blah. I'd be like, okay, that's feedback.
Yeah.
I can figure that out. Versus just quietness. So uh that I saw progress last year pretty much universally. I do think that these are going to be weird adults. Like
Yeah.
I think they're going to be very different in that sense. I don't know better or worse. I think there are going to be things that we feel confident doing that they don't feel confident doing, but I also think they're going to be thinking about things in a bit more of a conscientious way.
I think we're already weird adults. Like
Yeah.
I do see a lot of everyone is weird, but like in more than just a normal generational divide, I see a lot of things different between people my parents' age and people my age. And I think a lot of that is technological, it's all cultural, it's all um anxieties about global warming and the world ending, and like every generation has their version of that, and in many ways we've been, at least we in America, have been spared by not having to deal with the horrors of World War II. But at the same time, like, um, I think there's just infinite uncertainty about everything in life. And education is one of those things that's supposed to feel better. Like, it's, the constant process of humanity to educate the younger generations and to pass on all the knowledge that we have from before, and they're our future. And it just feels like that sort of illusion has been shattered in many ways. And I don't want to like take the really dark escapist route of like, oh, school is just to babysit children until they are broken into sad spirited people who can be part of the workforce. I'm more optimistic than that, but it's a really weird sort of philosophical feeling of like looking at the entire educational system in America from the age of 3 to 18 in college and to like figure out how to make it better.
Yeah.
It's very daunting, which is why I'm doing this.
Yeah. I think you're totally right. I think students are super aware and more critical of school in a much more effective way than I was at their same age. I used to think that like I used to think that I just didn't like subjects. I'd never questioned the fact that what was being presented to me or the way in which it was being presented to me was bad
Mm,
or not effective for me. So I think it's really good that students are looking at that. I do think uh, either intentional or unintentional, probably intentional, schools are created as a way to a place for your kids to be while you work so that they can be ready to work, right? That would be an outright stated thing by many schools. And it's the only time I ever actually argue with teachers because I do respect different pedagogies, but the one phrase that I can't stand is like it won't be like this in the real world. And I'm like, I don't know, like, what is this not real?
yeah,
I don't get like, is this a simulation we protected right now? Because we're grading them a lot harshly than I don't know if I
yeah,
was okay. No, percentage wise, it's just percentage like grades in general are just like so mind-boggling to me. I don't get how 70% of something versus 80% of something is better or worse because you have to define exactly what that is. I don't know what getting 70% of grammar right versus 80% of grammar right is.
right.
Um, I think that I don't know. I think that the real world in a lot of ways is a lot more lenient
Mm,
than like I'm using the real world.
yeah,
I think school is a lot more critical of students than what they're going to see in life after high school. I think college professors, for the most part, ones who don't have like egos, I think like big egos that are like, it's hard to pass my class, which some do. Um, are open to communication. They want you to get your diploma, or they want you to get your like your BA or whatever. And you know, there will be fines for missing payments, but you can still make the payment. And that will be the objective you reach. And just in general, for the most part, outside of like law enforcement, you're given the benefit of the doubt, right?
yeah,
Like most humans, I think, just want good to be assumed in them. And if teachers can do that at an early start, we can do a lot to not disenfranchise students from the act of learning,
yeah,
which is so powerful. Not just to trust their own learning, because the internet is a great tool for studying, but self-guidance can only get you so far. It's why I love language because I think it's so cool to hear, like gain access into someone else's thoughts. So if we can figure out that you know, like good faith communication can lead to more interest in education, then teachers will be doing their job. And I have a lot of faith in what I've seen in younger teachers. And I have a lot of faith in what I've seen in my prior site's administration. We'll see how the other schools I work at are, but just I think that uh, we should be doing better. I don't know how if we'll see a huge change in our lifetimes, but I I think schools are finally learning to realize that like they're not as they're not overstating their importance and that they can be more collaborative with students. and it can be a co-learning process.
I think that's a literal perfect place to end this on a hopeful note, on a positive
Yeah.
note, because we're right down to the wire. I wanted to thank you for being here and being our first educational guest. I think your philosophy is one that I really aspire to model and sort of like whatever. I don't know that I'll ever be a teacher again. I was a debate coach a while ago, but like in every conversation I have with people, I aspire to model sort of your values and ethics. And I appreciate you being willing to talk about it. It's awesome. I think we'll do good in the world. I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you for holding the space to talk about it. I love talking about this type of stuff, and hopefully more and more teachers are willing to not be so authoritative.
Yeah.
But
And it's not like woo woo youngster bullshit either.
yeah,
It's like, you know, we need to do better to like care about these things and treat people as people.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you,
Well,
Katie.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.